what is going on with Gen G? They have a match in 3 days' time. What's up, everyone? Welcome back to another week of VCT offseason out here in the Pacific. Rostermania continues, but we're actually moving pretty quickly. It feels like across all regions, but especially Pacific, we're moving pretty quickly. We've already had one of the big offseason events as well with the Red Bull Homegrounds qualifiers. Multiple teams showing up there with presumably full rosters getting prepped for 2025. So without further ado, let's jump right into it and see what's been going on. As you can see, we don't have too many crazy updates this week, but the biggest one probably from last week coming into this week is going to be ZETA Division. They actually announced their full roster right after our video was uploaded, so I left it in the comments below, but we didn't have a chance to talk about it, so we'll dive into that. And then afterwards, since it's been a bit of a quiet week, we'll discuss a couple of the reports slash rumors that have been milling about for a couple of the remaining teams. But let's talk ZETA Division, and this is going to work out well because we actually got to see them right away in the Red Bull Homegrounds qualifiers for APAC, and they got to play up against teams like T1, RQ, and DFM as well, so it was a pretty decent look. So they bring on CLZ, or Clues, CLZ, XTL, and Ciota. I'm not quite sure exactly how they want us to pronounce that in English, but Ciota, and then Jonta coming in as the head coach. Listed as the head coach, but obviously because of language barrier, it does appear that XQQ is going to be the one who is communicating mostly with the teams. We'll see if they kind of switch it up, or it's always going to be doubles when it comes to VCT, but at Red Bull Homegrounds, they only had a slot for one coach on the stage, so it was XQQ up there kind of celebrating his big return to the team, or the main team I should say, because he was still under the ZETA Division banner. This was a pretty big move. Obviously there have been other members within Challengers Japan or other academy hopefuls that people were looking forward to seeing. I think the biggest one probably being the Riddle core of the old ZETA Division Academy members, but these were also members. The Fennel team was also a team where a lot of fans who were following Challengers Japan wanted to see these core members rise up. Especially Ciota's been one of those members that has been talked about time and time again, just as a single individual, of someone that people wanted to see given a chance at the higher level. And then when it comes to IGLs, I would say I've had this discussion with quite a few people. Pacific, and I would say just in general around the world, but Pacific specifically also suffers especially from a lack of reliable IGLs, and it doesn't get any better when it's, specified into one single, country or sub-region within Pacific. So Japan also struggling to find reliable IGLs. Obviously, we're all hoping that each of these regions are kind of growing and developing their own IGLs as we go. But CLZ is one that people would look at and say, okay, well, this is someone you could pick up as an IGL. Like, this is a guy that if you need an IGL, this is who you're looking at. So it just goes to make sense that then you would just pick up this core to bring in. You already have the calling and comms kind of in place, and then you have two really, really experienced veterans when it comes to Depp and Sugar Zero, where they should be able to adapt, and they can also hold their own a little bit. It's not like they have a really strong color. I mean, they're both very skilled, right? But they don't skew super hard one way or the other. So on paper, it seems like it would make sense. And then bringing in Jonta coming in alongside the members of the players of Fennel, and then XQQ coming back. Listen, here's the thing about XQQ. I'm thinking back because the announcement video was pretty hype. He turns around and he says, "I'm back." And I'm like, okay, well, this is cool. Like, this is a man who definitely has some stage presence. And that's always been fun to follow along ZETA Division's past Valorant career. But I'm also going to say there was always this question about whether XQQ was part of the reason ZETA was getting stagnant when he was still coaching the team before this year, right? So all the way through 2023. There was a question of, is XQQ just not able to really push further and catch up and beyond the meta, or maybe he's not able to push the players to do so, whatever it might be. And it could be a combination of things. I mean, the roster had stayed together for a long time alongside the coaching, so it's a mix of things. But it was just funny to me because I was one of those people where I had my doubts about XQQ. So normally on paper, XQQ returning to the main coaching staff wouldn't have been something I was very excited about, but the way they presented it, I was like, oh yeah, that's kind of exciting. And then I thought to myself, I actually on paper there isn't really any reason it should be. Yes, he was part of the team that made the fairy tale run, but so were the rest of the players, and obviously they didn't replicate it ever since. So, questions were there and they were floating around, but we got to see them at Red Bull home grounds during the qualifiers for Pacific, and they looked quite hopeful. Now, some people will say, didn't we see the same thing about Zeta Division last year with Uran and Huron coming in and the team looking like they were going to be a bit more flexible and a bit more proactive? And yes, I said similar things last year, but just from watching a couple of these games that they played at Red Bull home grounds, I'm going to tell you, actually it was in fact Red Bull home grounds last year as well, but I'm going to tell you that it looks even more different, because right now the look that we got this time around in this offseason is that they really seem committed to that change as a team. Whereas last year it was a mix of, hey, we got these youngins, we're going to let them get a little comfortable. They also didn't have depth playing last year at Red Bull home grounds. There were things where it's like, okay, these rookies look a little bit more proactive and the other veterans are working around them. That's kind of exciting. And if anything, we were so desperate for any type of change for Zeta Division last year. Whereas I would say, yes, we're still desperate, but this time they looked overall pretty committed to getting proactive. Now, this doesn't mean it was clean. It doesn't mean it looked great, but also, it hasn't been much time. So pick and choose where you want to give the benefit of the doubt. But I'm just going to say, I think the fact that you're switching the IGL and the core that follows the IGL should be the difference maker. Now, probably the biggest concern is, can they keep up, right? Can those members, right? Can the ex-Fennel members keep up with the rest of VCT Pacific? We know Deb can, and Share Zero kind of can. I would argue that he hasn't really had a resurgence into his peak form that we saw back in the Fairy Tale Reykjavik run. So, and then on top of that, it's been a little bit inconsistent. Yes, I know he did a little bit of calling in between, so I'll cut him a little bit of slack. But Sugar Zero also wasn't necessarily bottom of the barrel either. He was just there. He existed in Pacific. But Depp can hold his own. Obviously, he's near the top, I would say, when he's at his best when it comes to Pacific. So the big question is okay, seems like they have a bigger commitment to getting more proactive, right? They're taking contact to erase options to go through the process of elimination. They're taking fights. Not all of the sequencing is very good, but listen, when it comes to Zeta, we just want to see them play Valorant. We don't want to watch them sit in Valorant. We want to watch them play Valorant, and I feel like we got to watch them play Valorant at Red Bull home grounds during the qualifiers. So now it's just a matter of, do they continue and not buckle when it comes to playing against the best teams in Pacific? Because the overall discussion when it comes to Pacific around the world right now is, wow, everyone looks like they're upgrading. It's going to be tough competition. Middle of the pack is going to be intense, and it's going to be a very, very wide range of teams in the middle of the pack. But even the top level, there's some questions, right? Because Gen G didn't stay all together. DRX made some big changes. Throughout 2024, I guess the entire year. And Talon, okay, they just added in Primi. How is that going to look? PaperX is really the only constant at the very top. And then Team Secret also had a bit of a change in the middle of the year, but they also never quite broke into the top. So there's all these questions about, okay, yeah, PaperX probably somewhere near the top. And if we are to trust the process, Gen G and DRX probably somewhere near the top still. So the top three, that shouldn't shake too much. But then what happens after that? And who would be able to challenge those top three? That's a big question mark right now for Pacific. So while Zeta looks better and it looks much more hopeful than their past, that bar is pretty low. I'm just saying, it is. They would have to unlock their peak potential and play at that throughout to get to a Masters, which is not easy for anybody. And it's not easy for anybody. And I'm just going to temper my expectations there. I think they're going to look better, but the competition is also going to be stronger. So, yeah, I'm not sure. But it's exciting. It is exciting. Also, just because these are players that within Japan, they've been kind of proven within their own ecosystem of Challengers Japan. So that's exciting. it's also just a completely new era of Zeta Division now, right? The core of Zeta, now they're not the core anymore. The core of Fennel has now become Zeta Division. So it's a very big shift. I would say, I would say it's just as big as the shift that DRX had coming into this year or in the middle of this year. And now DRX going even further with Mako being the only one remaining. So it's a big shift, even if they weren't always at the top. And it's something to keep an eye on. Enough about that. Before we move on to a couple of these reports and rumors, let's talk about briefly the other teams that showed up at Red Bull Home Grounds as well. So it makes sense that we would go right to T1. They were the other ones in the finals. They actually won, so they will be going to Berlin to play in the main event of Red Bull Home Grounds, and they looked really exciting. There was a bit of, obviously there was a bit of talk in the beginning of the event, them still sticking with the chamber, trying a chamber vice composition on Lotus. Outside of the compositions, individually, they all looked really solid. I mean, Meteor and Buzz picking up right where they left off for the year of 2024. Izu looking a lot more comfortable now on a role that isn't duelist, and hopefully this is something that they stick with, right? I think Izu's someone who could benefit a lot from consistency. Like if you really think about it, yes, there was a lot of hope behind him, but he was also thrown into the deep end, and no, he did not rise right up, right back up to the surface. So it's rough. So he wasn't the chosen one, but I still think he's got a lot of potential, and I think you should give him that chance. And it looks like this consistency of him being the info, right, the info initiator, should be very, very helpful. And a bit of that flex as well, playing the things like the Vice when it's needed. I get it, but as long as there's a specific pool that he's focused on, rather than being like, we want you to be Flex, actually, we want you to be Smokes, actually, we want you to be Duelist. Like, let's not do that anymore. I was a little worried about Izu playing non-Duelist, but, I mean, he played really well during this event, and hopefully, again, that's not just a matter of less pressure, but it's something that comes out from consistency, something that he's slotting himself into. Stacks is the other big one that I had a question mark on, and mainly the IGLing, and not necessarily the quality of IGLing, but the mix, the balance of quality versus can he handle all of that while keeping up. I'm still going to argue that I'm in the school of I don't think Stacks' best value is as a primary IGL. I'm just going to stick by that until I'm proven otherwise. And I could be proven otherwise, and that's fine. I can be wrong. That's okay. But I'm just going to stick by that fact. However, at this event, I would say that Stacks seemed to find a good balance of a little bit more loose calling, right? Where you still seem to have some good reads on what you want to do round to round. But also, it seemed like he was very quick, or the team was very quick on making decisions. Like they were cutting their losses early. They were going through the process of elimination nice and early. And I wonder if Meteor had an impact on that with the experience that he had with the style Gen G figured out this year of, hey, the meta isn't going to be all info all the time anymore. Let's go heavy 1-4, push out, process elimination, rotate, right? And try to get early reads. I wonder if Meteor kind of helps bring that in, whether it's actually live in the game through comms or just something that they talked about. But I could see a hint of that. Like I could see a mix of Gen G and old DRX calling style and just their philosophy about the game. And that was kind of exciting. And I thought Stacks handled that very well. There were a couple moments where clearly they were setting up for big set plays, but they weren't so concerned about playing the perfect set play like old DRX used to. And they would work with what they had, and they would actually leave these pockets open for themselves where it's higher risk but higher reward, where you have to slot in, you have to fill in those pockets with individual mechanics, right? You're basing it off of aim, you're basing it off of confidence, but if it works, it's even better because they can't see it coming. And if this is something that Stacks can figure out, it's going to be very similar to Munchkin, where yes, their past career had me doubting the cap of their, potential. And I would say I actually rated Munchkin's IGLing way lower than I ever did for Stacks. But it could unlock a whole nother level like it did for Munchkin. Because I can see that. Like, based on what we saw from T1 at this event, that small little mix where it's like you still have the good foundation of what a set play should look like and the complete playbook from DRX and all of that. But now you're able to say, it doesn't have to be perfect. In fact, it's almost better if it's not. Because that way they don't always expect exactly how it's going to happen. You can't always get the same read on it. And you have players who can handle it. You got Buzz and Meteor. I mean, even just those two, you have it. And if Izu and Sylvan can gain the same level of confidence, and even yourself, like that's a powerhouse team. So I would say T1, I think, played pretty much up to expectation when you look at the entire event as a whole. Hopefully this is just a start and they continue to grow. Now, when it comes to the other three teams, I just realized I kept forgetting that Talon was even there. This isn't anything about first of all, yes, I watched the least of Talon's games, but it's really not about necessarily their performance at this event, which I do think was a little disappointing given the expectations, but it's more so that they didn't actually have any changes. Everybody else at the event had changes. So this isn't anything against, it's not anything against Talon. But not much to say about Talon. Although I am curious about how they're going to utilize Premi. And I think a lot of people have this question mark, right? Because obviously it seemed like Premi was primed to be this dedicated duelist who's out there just fragging, and people are just setting him up, and he thrives off of that. It seemed like that was the expectation, and then they didn't do that anymore. They had him playing Cypher, but I can't help but think back to some of the stories that Frost and sometimes the rest of the team has shared about Premi and the process it took to bring him onto the team, where he had these bad habits of solo queue, right? He's playing like he's in solo queue. He's playing like he's trying to win a solo queue game, and you just can't do that reliably all the time, right? You can't always just ego fight and win just enough rounds when it comes to a team game, because the other team's going to be playing as a team. And I wonder, like, I wouldn't be surprised, just based on what we've heard from Frost, if he would be the type of guy that would say, okay, during the offseason, you think you can handle that? Well, do it. Listen, trial by fire. Put you through it. If you prove yourself, great. I'll say I was wrong. If not, well, now you got to accept it. Like, I can see him being the type of coach that would use that type of training where he says, all right, you know what? You really think you're in the right? Then do it, right? It's off season. It's okay if we lose. And if you win, I'll accept my loss. But if not, now you got to deal with it, right? Kind of putting an ultimatum. So I wouldn't read into it too much just yet. Like, part of me kind of wants that to be true, because I think it would, I mean, for one, it would really complete my image of Frost as a coach. And I kind of dig that. Like, where you're saying, I'm willing to be proven wrong, but you have to prove it, so I'll give you a chance. And the offseason is the perfect time to do it. There could be other, it could be a different world where maybe after playing some pro matches, Premi realizes that he doesn't want to be the one that has to deal with being, shouldering the burden of being duelist. We've heard a lot of players talk about this, and especially duelist players, where it's like, it's not easy. So in that world, I could, there's another option where maybe either Premi decided or the team decided that Premi's not ready for that. And so you put him into a position where he can just focus on his aim a bit more, because that's what he's good at. A lot of times, Sentinel is usually the first one that a lot of people will try. If you have someone who's, good as a duelist, great at aiming, but you got to get them just a little bit more of their own self-sufficiency, okay, Sentinel could be the one. Now, the other teams that had changes, RQ and DFM. RQ, not a massive change. It's just Kush coming in. Kush played very, very well. I think it proved to a lot of people that, including myself, right, that didn't follow his career too closely, on why he was picked up, why a lot of people thought this was a good pickup within the Indonesian scene. That's great. However, I'm going to say, and I'm going to put this in comparison between RQ and DFM, I'm going to say I was more impressed with the changes of DFM than I was with RQ. Take this with a grain of salt, because it's not that hard to impress for DFM. Because really, the expectation was 0. So, yes, it is easier. But to me, there were... I think I'm sometimes a bit harsh on RQ just because I have such hopes for them. But to me, one of the biggest problems we've seen with RQ is that they have these rounds very consistently where they're not on the same page, like the players. And this isn't just a matter of like the IGL and the rest or the coaching and the rest. It's like it's always a different combination too. So it just seems like they never quite have figured out what their identity as a team is versus what's my identity as an individual player. There needs to be a good balance, right? I think Gen G figured that out in 2024. I think Paper X in general has almost always figured that out. I mean, maybe sometimes it's a little simple for them because if you're not sure what to do, you go aggressive. But no matter what it is they figure that out. T1 was a team that did not figure that out the past 2 years, and we're hoping they figure it out now. DRX is a team where they're struggling to redefine that for themselves. And RQ was one where no matter which version of the roster, there was always consistently these rounds in the games that they lose, or even in the games that they barely win. Like, the reason it seems like they barely win a lot of these times is because, okay, if you didn't have those rounds, you would probably you would win it the way people expected you to. I feel like RQ, they're making small adjustments up and up, but it feels like that's a core concern that they haven't quite solved yet with any of these iterations. And I feel like that problem will always be the ceiling, no matter how much you're improving under it. So this is one where it's really hard to tell from the outside what would be the issue. Like, is it comms? Is it personalities? Is it a gap between coaching and players? Is it a mental thing? Like, there's so many things that can happen, but it just seems like every time a new scenario comes up, or every time like they're in a bit of a we got to make something happen situation, a couple players have different opinions that they're not talking about and solving and finding one solution for, and they're all doing their own solutions, which means that no one necessarily is in the wrong, but you're now all in the wrong because you're not doing it together. Overall, they looked pretty strong. They looked, they basically showed the potential I expected them to have. But I was slightly disappointed. And DFM, I was impressed with. I believe Art is IGLing, so that's cool. It would go to explain why he returned from coaching, and maybe that I think I speculated that, right? Maybe him coming back from coaching would be even better as a player / IGL. Looks like that's going to be working out very well for them. Gen is a complete rookie, but I think he caught the attention of quite a few people watching. And I would just overall say that, first of all, yes, May now has support, so it's not just May and friends. But something I noticed was, I don't know if you can straight up say if these new members would always win 1v1s against the old members. I think some of them, it would be a little different if it came to 1v1s. But I think it's, again, the calling and the reads that Art and the team has, where they are just set up for better success when it comes to duels. Like, you have better expectations. You're not always having to flick around to get, double, triple kills. You've used your process of elimination to prep yourselves, to position yourselves in a way that's advantageous for each fight. We just saw that much more consistently from DFM, which led to May not always just full sending it every time, which was so refreshing to see, that he was like waiting for the team and has trust in the team, and that's working out for them. That's all great and exciting. So while the bar, yes, is very low, I would say that DFM looks to definitely look stronger at the very least, which is, quite frankly, really all we want to see. Well, I thought this would be a lot shorter of an episode since we didn't have much news, but I guess Red Bull Homegrounds kind of takes care of that. So that's really all there is to talk about it. Originally, I thought maybe we would talk about some of these reports and rumors, since most of the other teams are locked in. In fact, listen, the report for GE. Oh, well, I guess, okay. There was news. I actually didn't mark it as something to talk about, but Juvenile was finally announced officially to be the head coach of Global Esports. It was getting to the point where everyone was just so talking about it so candidly that I almost forgot that there wasn't an official announcement yet. But yes, he is confirmed, coming over from Leviathan. People have asked me if I think that that's a worthy jump, like if it's something that fans should have a lot of hope for, if they should trust it and have a lot of faith. Here's the thing. The whole goal of being an assistant coach is to eventually be a head coach. And sometimes you're a head coach of a smaller team, and then you go in as an assistant coach to a bigger team. So I don't think you can be like, was an assistant coach really going to be a good head coach? Because if you're only picking up head coaches, your options are real small. So that I don't think you should be concerned about. But I would say if there's ever an assistant coach that you want to pick up, you want one that's had a lot of experience, that's kind of been to the top of certain levels, has played against a bunch of other teams, has worked with other coaches, has that reputation, and Juvenile definitely has it. Now, what skill set does he personally have? Exactly what was the work division in Leviathan? We don't know for sure, but he's confident. Global Esports saw something in him. I'm excited to see what he can do. Listen, HSK, people were not excited for, and he proved himself. So I would say for Juvenile, there's at least some level of excitement and expectation. So I'm curious. I'm curious to see what he can bring out. Now, the reports are that he'll be joined by Elevated, which, if you don't know, Elevated, he recently started coaching, but he's been grinding away in like theory crafting and podcasting with TMV and things like that for a very long time. So I'm excited what Elevated can bring as well. If you look at some of the things he theory crafts, he has some cool ideas. Now, whether they are good in execution or whether you can help execute them or not is a whole different skill set. But coming in as a coach / assistant coach, I think that could be quite exciting as well if it's true. And the rest, the actual roster, Yudotan, Crystal, Papichulo, Kelly S, Yokam. I mean, it's an exciting roster, let's be honest. I mean, like, Papichulo is a guy from the Philippines that everyone's been dying to see at a higher level because he's just so insanely clutch, and you wonder if that works at a higher level. Crystal, quite a similar story, helped lead two teams, to the very finals of Ascension, and actually won with one of them this year in China. So, and IGLs are just so rare, so Crystal's a big one. Yudotan has been playing for a decent amount of time, starting in Challenges Korea, most recently playing in China. I would say that when he first started, it's not a name that I thought we were going to see for a very long time. I just thought he was just kind of there. He had some moments, but he seemed very raw, and we didn't really see any, too much progress within Korea. But I would say with his time in China, he's really grown into his own. So I think that could be exciting. I mean, I think this roster could be exciting. The only concern I have is no one really has the veterancy at the highest level. So there isn't really a rock. You can argue that, like, Yudotan, got some tier 1 experience in China. You could argue that Papichulo and Crystal, they've been playing and being the rock for their own teams and challengers for so long, and that's true, but it is different. It's different, right? I mean, playing at a whole extra tier above is a different thing. So that would be my one concern, where yes, like, Crystal has a lot of experience IGLing, and I don't think Crystal is the type of player who's going to buckle just because the opponents are Paper X. But, as a whole team, when push comes to shove, do you have more than one person who can say, we got this, keep your mental in check, this is how you become a better team and player? I don't know. Obviously, maybe that's up to the coaching staff, and Juvenile has that experience with Leviathan, so maybe that could help. So that would be my biggest concern if this roster is true, but we'll have to wait and see, because the reports have been pretty accurate so far. I would say actually pretty much all accurate so far when it comes to reports and not leaks or rumors for Pacific, but we'll see if it's true. Now, off of that, Blaze King is now completely a free agent, or unrestricted free agent, right? He's released from Global Esports, whereas Polvi is technically still under contract, so he's still a restricted free agent. Not sure what's going to happen there, but we'll have to wait and see. The other kind of reports worth talking about are Boom Esports. They need a fifth, as SB was released. Although they, were able to ascend kind of, to their fortunate scenario. The hints were, the owner of Boom Esports has been throwing out some hints here and there, and now there's a report that it's DOS9. That was the one I was leaning more towards. DOS9 alongside Sultan on Revenant was a great player. I would argue that Sultan was the one that impressed me more, but they also play different roles, so if DOS9 can slot in, that would be great. The big concern a lot of people have for this team is, okay, that means the entire team now has to comm in English. Is that going to be better or worse for them? That's actually that's a good question, because, again, comming in-game is very different from just being able to, like, joke around with, friends and players. So if that's true, we'll see. But as an individual, DOS9 alongside Sultan was another player from Ascension Pacific that I would have been excited to see given a chance. So we'll see if it comes true. Before we go, though, what is going on with Gen G? They have a match in 3 days' time, for 3.5 days, at the 10 Invitational. And yes, you could just play with subs and be like, ha-ha, off-season event, but, like, I don't think anybody wants to see that. It's not like we don't know what Texture Munchkin and Karen can do. So, like, what is going on here? I mean, they could pull a ZETA and announce it, 2 days before they have to play their match. So I'll wait, but Like, you got an event going on. Like, you need players. I you know, like, I don't know. I don't know what's going on here. Zest did tweet about Neon out of the blue, that he hates Neon. So I don't know. Maybe Zest is coming back to the to the pro scene. I don't know, but you know, that entire Bleed roster is still looking for team as far as I know. So I don't know what's going on. We don't have any solid reports yet. There are rumors and speculations, but my point is if they didn't have an event, I'd be like, whatever. I wouldn't even bring it to your attention. But they have to play a match in a couple days' time. So hopefully we get an announcement that isn't, hey, we're playing with a stand-in or 2 stand-ins. Hopefully it's not that, because I feel like that would just be a bummer. I feel like it's going to be like ZETA, where I'm going to upload this video and Gen G is going to be like, welcome, so-and-so. And if it is what it is. That's what I get for uploading videos on a Wednesday. But that's all the news we have for this week. We will try to dive in a little bit more to the games that we're seeing during the offseason in separate videos. I went a little ham on the Red Bull section this week just because it was the first offseason event and we've all been starving for action. So we went a little bit off the rails here. Not too much news this week, but overall, Pacific continues to look exciting, continues to look good. Now that we have, I mean, how many teams do we have that are pretty much prepared? 7. Really? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, so we got a majority of teams now really set. So I'm curious. Let me know down in the comments below. How do these rosters look for so far? Do you think it looks as competitive as most of us are saying it is? Or are you expecting not much to change when it comes to the overall rankings and ratings of the Pacific teams? Let me know your thoughts. Of course, if you enjoyed the video, a like is much appreciated. And, of course, subscribe to the channel to make sure you follow up on other videos that are going to be uploaded in the future. That's it for now. Hopefully, we get to talk about Gen G's roster in next week's video. And with that, I'll see you next time.